He's one of my favorite vocalists of all time. I ended it like, no, I need it bad. He came in and just like deleted all that. I was like, no, that's not the vibe at all. I have like this reputation for singing these very serious, very painful kind of songs, intense songs. Yeah. I think I was just offering a new, fresh kind of voice and perspective to cinema, Indian cinema music.
Hello Sid, welcome to Film Companion. So this is about breaking down the songs that you've sung for A.R. Rahman.
Sure.
So I want to know first, obviously we're going to begin with Adiye.
Yes.
And when you entered Rahman's studio, so to speak, what was it that greeted you? Was it the melody line? Was it a chord progression? What? Because he builds his songs.
Sure.
As opposed to like having everything pre-composed. So what was it that you saw when you first?
Sure. So yeah, I actually didn't record that with him physically. I wasn't in the studio with him. I was in Boston. I was still in college, and yeah, I just woke up to an email from him saying, "I have this song I want you to try," from Money Sir's film, and then he had sent like a scratch. So that scratch was like my introduction to the song, where it was just like the rhythm, like a very basic drum beat, some piano chords, and him singing the way he quite often does, like his gibberish of just like getting the vocal idea out. And
what did that sound like?
Like it was just like that, like he had certain lyrics in there, and then some of it would just trail off. And I'm trying to think. It felt like a folk song. It very much like the way he sang it. It had this certain like very earthy, grounded vibe to it. But in the email, he had also said, "I want you to do this in like a blues style," and he said which he said to me multiple times since then for other songs. He said, "Just internalize the melody, and then we'll figure the rest of it out." So the melody was there, like it was the definition of the melody was there, but it was also kind of ambiguous. Where I was just kind of sitting there the whole day listening to this thing over and over, like, how am I going to do this? I don't really. And he sent me a lyric sheet, but I didn't know which lyrics went with which part. So I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm just going to get as much of this down as possible. And I was just riffing through it a lot. So he gave me like a few lines, like I just took a few lines and just sang like, if I were going to vocalize it in a blues way, how would I kind of think about this? And then the session was at night for me. It was like around like 10 or so, and I just got a studio in Boston, and I was all by myself. It was just me. I was engineering it and recording myself and doing all of it. And then AR was on Skype, but my laptop was really old. I was just like a broke college student at the time, so the camera wasn't working. So I couldn't see him, but I just was hearing his voice while I recorded. And it just started with and that was a little bit easier because he wanted to be more open, and the way
that was him or you?
That was me singing it, but his brief was just everything was a little bit more straight with that all like right. None of that was there. He just kind of gave it to me just bare bones, and just so that I knew. It was almost like he gave me a roadmap saying, this is how the song needs to flow. Now think about how you'd sing it. So once I started singing, it was really just like a rapid fire of take after take after take, where he's like, "Okay, one more, try this time, try this time." So
this is him on Skype and you in the studio.
Yeah.
All right.
So so I'd sing. He said, "No, that's too much. Can you tone it down, bring it more to the melody?" So then I'd do another take, and kind of from there he sculpted my vocal takes one after another. So soon, maybe about like 20 minutes into it, that first bit was done. Then we went on to the Palaguri. So his word Palaguri Padapuriyara. Like his was like very kind of like there's these punches in it, right? So he wanted me to have the same intensity, but start like again adding these little embellishments here and there that would bring the authenticity of a blues piece. And for me, it was really cool because that was the type of music, like the blues R&B stuff is the stuff I'd really been focusing on while I was in college. So while we were recording it, I was like really in it. So I didn't have a conception of what this was going to be like as a finished piece. And also, I thought this was an audition. I didn't know it was an actual recording. 2 hours went by and we got most of the song done, and my session was up. Like I blocked it for 2 hours, and then luckily the person after me canceled their session, so serendipitously we got another 2 hours. And one moment specifically that stood out, we'd gotten most of the song, like Bhumi vittu sargatikni, like all that stuff, it kind of followed, even though the melody from Charanam to Charanam is different, it followed the same aesthetic approach where the Charanam builds in a specific way and then leads you back into the hook where it's just big. But the very end of the song, he just said that I needed to end with a bang. That kind of was his brief for me while I was recording it. So the very, very last phrase is, it goes, Adiye, and it's open at that point, no more drums, everything is dropped out. That Yanna Yangani Kuti Poda. He just said, try something crazy. So I tried that specific riff, and he's like, whoa, that was cool. I'm like, oh, okay, that's dope. So the recording was, I honestly didn't even have time to really process what was going on. I was just reacting to him. So he was just telling me, he'd have little melodic changes. So, Mina tuki rakavaranja, mana velani visiyarin, it was like really subtle things like that he was very specific about.
Like what? How did you sing it?
I would say I might, something that was much more just like second nature to me. Like the way I would have sung it if I was just singing a song at a show or something like that. But he was like, no, just give it that extra push over there. And sometimes my energy would be a little low when I was singing. He's like, no, you have to really dig into it, you know, and give it that bite. And that, I think, that specific note was for the boomy because even my pronunciation at times started getting a little loose where I wasn't really articulating or spitting out every lyric. But he was very insistent that every lyric was really spit out. I think part of that was to make sure that and this was my first song ever, to make sure the American accent didn't come out at all, and also to give it, it's not, I wouldn't say it's an intense song, but it's it packs a punch for sure.
It's very passionate.
Yes,
yeah.
And every there's not that, and then another part is Manasa Kairaki. So in all these blues flourishes, there's this one Indian, almost like semi-classically based riff, and I think that's something I did as an accident, because I was like falling back on something that was comfortable to me, and he liked it, so he said, yeah, let's use that. So that was kind of like the way all of that went. It was over, the session finished up, you know, we got the whole song done, and again, I was still under the impression that this was an audition. They asked me to send the files, and then and that was that. You know, I was up to like 4, just making sure I was sending everything properly, and I was studying music production and engineering at Berkeley at the time, so this actually tested my chops as an engineer as well, because having to like set the preamp the right way and all this, I was freaking out. And then I sent it, and then I didn't hear anything like for a while, and then I actually went to meet Sir in Los Angeles. I flew out to LA to meet him maybe about a month later, and he told me that Money Sir wasn't really down, he didn't really like my version, and I think maybe he had really fallen in love with the more folky kind of rendition that Sir had initially composed it with. But yeah, I don't know what exactly happened between then and like a few months later, but Money Sir was convinced and the song came out. So, yeah.
So when you did this recording, were you guys going line by line? Were you going passage by passage? That is, you did the Pallavi once and did it again and did it again, or each line in the Pallavi you went once and then, you know, how was
If my memory serves me correct, I think we did passage by passage. I think Sir wanted to have the flow of the song, and it's a flow kind of song. It's not really one that you can comp, because there's a lot of imperfections actually. I go back and listen to that specific recording, because I mean now I perform that song all the time, and so it's really refined. since then, but I listened to that specific recording, and there's a lot of points where it's far from perfect. You know, my vocal takes are, but
like, give me an example. What's not?
There's one specific part. Adiye, Adiye, enna enga nee kootti pora. Adiye, Adiye, enna enga nee kootti pora. It almost is a and I think that was a mistake on my part, or at least I thought it was a mistake, where it should have hit the like a lower note, but I hit kind of like a major over there, and he kept that. And again, it was an imperfection, but I think he loved the rawness of it. And at the time, you know, I never sung a song for film. I hadn't even actually really recorded that much at that point in time. Even when I was in college, I would do a lot of live recordings, but I was not really a studio vocalist yet. So it was all kind of a new paradigm for me. But I think he really capitalized on that. He realized that there's like this kind of rawness and I wouldn't say innocence, but just like this was all, he could tell that this was a new experience, and he used that energy and really made something of it.
And when you recorded the song, you said you just had a basic drum beat.
Yeah, I think I had piano chords, drums, and then there might have been some like background vocals for the Adiye, Adiye, just like basic background vocals. That was it. It was very, very, very bare bones. So then once I finished recording, and I think that's when they retracked the drums, got the whole kind of like choir and all that other stuff.
All right, what was it like when you heard the finished one?
So I listened to the finished version when I came to Chennai in like July. This was recorded in February of 2012. And I came to Chennai in July. I used to come every summer for vacation. And I came to record the Telugu version. I had to dub it. And that's when I knew, I still didn't know for sure, but I was like, oh, maybe the version is gonna happen. And I listened to it. I just remember the first time listening to it, not really knowing what to think. Mainly because I could identify the points of the song where I was like, oh, I could have done that better, I could have done this better. And the Telugu version, because I'd had time to digest the melody by that point, is more, not perfect, but more refined for sure. But there was a magic in the Tamil version. And I think what I've learned over the years, at that time, I didn't have the maturity to pick up on that kind of thing. And it's a very important characteristic, I think, that any composer or producer or arranger needs to have, is how to identify when you have those magic moments and just say that. And I think that trumps everything else. If you have magic moments, then it can be a very highly imperfect vocal take or rendition. Right. But if that's there, then you know it's going to hit people in the gut. Right. And Sir's like, he can pick up on that like this. So I listened to it. I was just, everyone was like really excited for me. I remember like I went to the studio, and that was my first time meeting the engineers. I met them very briefly the very first time I met Sir, and that wasn't for like a recording. He just told me to come to the studio. But they were excited because they knew that this was a path-breaking kind of piece, and that I think I was just offering a new, fresh kind of voice and perspective to cinema, Indian cinema music. So I didn't really know how to process any of it. I was just taking it all in. And I mean, my grandfather was in films, and he was a arranger, composer, a Carnatic musician. So I'd heard stories about what the studio was like and stuff. In between like the Telugu version of the song, when we were recording it, we took a break and like we got snacks and like tea, and it reminded me of like stories that he'd tell me. But yeah, the first time I listened to it, I was just kind of blown away that it actually happened. A little disappointed in myself that I didn't like hit every note exact. But mostly I was just overwhelmed. And then, but nothing hit me even after the song came out. I think it came out like November of that year. I was so far removed from the industry at that point. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends that were working in the industry. I was just, you know, a kid from the US that would come stay in Malapur and like give a couple of Carnatic concerts, and that was like my perception of what Chennai is. So even when the song came out, I didn't know that it was doing really well. You know, I didn't know that it gained like this like cult kind of following. But then we had to go on like a radio run for the whole album. All of the singers who had performed, we went to all the different stations and that's when I think Shakti actually told me, she's like, do you know, like, people are going crazy about your song? I was like, oh, okay, that's amazing. It was just all surreal. I think that was what it was more than anything else, because, you know, getting to work with him, getting to debut in this industry is like a big thing already.
Right.
But this song felt like it was just perfect for me. I don't think I could have asked for a song that was any better. It just really locked in on the ethos of what I was like about, you know, musically, like just emotion, pain, passion, and a meeting point of the West and India, like the way in which that happened, it was just perfect.
It was you.
Yeah.
So then, Ennodu Nee Irundhal.
Yeah.
What about that?
So that was recorded in early 2013, and so Adiye had come out a few months prior, and I was in Chennai for like the December season again for concerts and whatnot, and I had performed with AR for a show, like a private show, and then I got a call from the studio while we were doing sound check saying you have to come to the studio tonight. Shankar Sir's movie, which I'd heard about, but I wasn't like all the way familiar with what was required of me. So I got to the studio after the show, and Shankar Sir was there, Kabilan Sir was there, and AR Sir came just a little bit after. And this was my first time that I get to record with AR Sir like in person.
Okay.
So I was really nervous, and he played the song, and the opening lines are really high. And I just finished a show where I had to perform Adiye. And during the show, actually, when I sang Adiye, my voice broke at one point. I remember right before going on stage, maybe when we were like finishing sound check, I had asked AR Sir if we could bring the song down a half step, just so I could sing it more comfortably. And he's like, no way. Like, there's like that kind of like grit that happens when you sing it that high is what, and my voice broke and I felt so stupid. I think like Amitabh Bachchan was like in the audience. Like it was like a star-studded audience, and I just felt real foolish. And then we went to the studio after, and he played me the scratch of Ennodu Nee Irundhal, and that was like the Pallavi was there, a couple charanams were basically there. And
this was again just the bare bones of the tune.
This was a lot more fleshed out than Adiye was, where there was a lot of the production kind of done. The melody was much more specific, and the lyric and melody already were tied together, where it wasn't really any just vocalizing. It was the parts were there, a lot of it at least. So he played it for me, and he asked if I could sing those opening lines, like if it was too high. And before I could say anything, he's like, no, you can do it. Just go. So, and this is, a lot of people have talked about this, but there's something about his space. Like that studio, it's really like a temple, or like, because it allows you to like forget everything else. And it could also just be, you know, me when I go there, I'm very focused, and I'm very much just like, completely surrendering to the moment and whatever he needs of me. But I walked in and we started those opening lines and my voice just opened up. Like there was all the breaking from before, all that just like flew right out the door. And we finished the opening lines. I could tell that he was happy. I could tell that there was like not a smile on his face, but he seemed sad. So he kept pushing me, you know, just to do a few more takes. So we got that done, but the real magic for that session started when Ennai naan yarelru sonnalum puriyade en kadal nee elru and he said, can you try like an embellishment? He didn't even say, can you try an embellishment? He said, do what you would do. Like what? And I tried some like Carnatic stuff. He was like, no Carnatic. And he's like, do some R&B stuff. So, and it's like a very specific, very minute detail. It's like not even a whole bar. It's like a beat. And I got that. He's like, yeah, do that again. So I did that. We kept moving. The rest of it was pretty straightforward. Then Unmei Kadal Yarendral Unne Enne Solvene Niyum Nanum Poye. That too, like the vibrato. So you can sing Niyum Nanum just like flat, or Niyum Nanum Poye, just like a little bit of vibrato to give it that like a little bit of a push. So and that's the thing, he kind of he catches these things like, you know, like when you're on your phone and you're editing like a video that's on your phone, you can do this thing where it zooms it in like in the bottom, and that's what he does like that's what he did with my voice, where I'd sing a thing, he's like, he has this like ability to just like lock right in and stretch it out and be like, make this happen, this specific embellishment or sangati or whatever. So we just did a few different takes of each of the taranams for that, and then we went on to like, you know how like in the beginning of the song that Ennodu Nee Irundhal line happens like 6 or 8 times, so he wanted each time to be subtly different from the other. So Ennodu Nee Irundhal then it's Ennodu Nee Irundhal, like stuff like that. There's, you know, you wouldn't really think about it, but he was very certain that each time had to be different so that the listener's ear could be, I didn't understand it at the time, I was just going on the journey, I was there with them. But when I listened to it afterwards, to make sure that if you're repeating the same line 8 times, you want to make sure the listener is being led along the whole time. So these small differences every time kind of allow for that. Then there's another one. Ennodu Nee Irundhal Uyirodu Naan Iruppen. Like that little thing where it's like these little R&B riffs.
That was you?
I don't remember. I don't think it was like me from like, I don't think I sang that and he said do this. I think he said it needs something there, a momentum push or something. So he said try something, and he's very specific about when he needs an R&B, kind of something sourced from the R&B aesthetic, and when he needs something that's more Indian, kind of classically based, you know. So he would just say try something R&B over there, and I'd try a few different things and he'd say that one works. Or I think what he'd probably do is record all of them and then go back and decide this one worked, this one didn't work. No, the specific part where he needed to be exactly how he did it was in the end. So you know how there's like the key shift, right? So it goes all that, but Ennodu Nee Irundhal, he had that like I was like he's like no, it has to be so Nee Irundhal, like that, because I had to sound like it was a beast, you know, like that is like that is like an A.R. Rahman vocal, like that's a signature thing, right? Where he has those little riffs that are very much as a singer, and he's one of my favorite vocalists of all time. And I don't know if like people like really kind of give him, they do, but for me he's just like, so like those little things he said, no, just sing it like this. And that ending portion, Nila Ulagatil Nan Vara. The first time I did it, I think Sir had stepped out the studio for a couple minutes, and they just, I was with the engineer, and he just said, I did a lot more, it was very soft. I'd ended it like, he came in, he just like deleted all that. He's like, no, that's not the vibe at all. He said, it has to be painful, it can't be soft, it has to be really like intense. For me, to this day, I'm just blown away by how clear of a vision he has, and he knows exactly just what won't work and what can be put in that position too. Because that I think is a really good example. Like I thought I sang something really pretty, you know, but then you watch it with the movie, the way the vocal goes, and it works for that moment.
Right.
Or even the beginning. I think he gave me like a reference of like Meatloaf, the singer Meatloaf, that I would have, even now when we perform it live, if I perform it with him, sometimes I sing it too pretty, you know? And he's like, no, it has to have that grit. That's what makes that moment something that people will be like, what is that? That actually took a long time for me to get, that opening bit. I think that might have been the last thing we did. It was like maybe like 4:35 in the morning. And again, another cliche that AR sort of works through the night, but we did actually work through the night for this one. But yeah, he spent a lot of time on just getting those opening lines exactly how he needed it. It had to have like a little bit of rasp, a little bit of air, and not too much presence vocally, which was a concept I just did not understand at the time. I was still very kind of like, it was a nascent part of my recording career. So I was like, like really just like normal is what I would say. It was like almost predictable. And I think one thing about him is he hates predictability, as we know, you know, and the way his songs have always moved. And it's something I really learned, you know, how to take myself outside of my comfort zone of what I normally do, and really kind of put myself in the position of what's happening in the film, what does that require, and how can I utilize my voice in such a way. And I think that's something that he just does really, really well with me. He knows when I'm starting to go into my just comfort zone, the stuff that I would go as a default, and he pulls me out of it real quick.
So we've talked about two intense songs,
Sure.
And I'm going to talk about another intense song,
Sure.
Thalli Pogathey.
Yeah.
But in the middle, I want to just ask you, just as a break, so how does a song like OMG Ponnu work? Does it like is it easier? Is it just, you know, or is there some kind of...
I think that one might have not been easier, but it was a little faster only because the amount of vocal parts that I had to do is substantially less than a Thalli or a Ennodu Nee Irundhal or even Adiye. I think that song has like 2 charanams. The hook is pretty like electronic. So it's like an electronic song, so it's a lot less. There's a lot less room for like improvising and trying stuff out. Just sing the melody, sing it. But even in that one, OMG Ponnu, I am like SAP. So that one I'd sung SAP Kudavani. He said try SAP Ku, just like an extra like. If I'm talking Carnatic terms, like a briga over there, but it's just like, you know what I mean? And again, attention to the very minute details that give songs that push when they need it. But then there's also that yamma yamma yamma. He said, think about if like, just sing it more playfully. Because I have like this reputation for singing these very serious, very painful kind of songs, intense songs. Yeah. And that's also like my bread and butter. I love that type of stuff because my voice lends itself, but this was obviously not that kind of a song. So he said, have more fun with it there. So, and that was, so he kind of, like I got moving a little bit more in the studio and we got it done. But so it's a faster process, but it's just as challenging, maybe more challenging because it's so far outside of something that, you know, that I would write myself or something that I would tend to like hum. It's really just like a completely 180 shift for me from what I'm used to doing.
Right.
So in that way, it took a little bit more for me, the kind of energy that I had to bring. Or Me Nigara, for example, it's like a joyful song, it's a playful song. I remember I was singing that, and parts of it just sounded sad, you know. So I was like, no, that doesn't work. It has to be like, you know, it has to be happy. And from that process, from that specific song, I learned how to actually smile when I record, because that really allows me to like lock into certain emotional spaces that can deliver what we need from the song. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thalli Pogathey.
Yeah, that's probably the most interesting and challenging song that I had to record. So for that one, Sir's Brief, I think when he was on his US tour, like the year before we recorded that, or the year, like months before we recorded that, he had just done like a jam session between, like just by himself, playing the keyboard, playing the chords, and just singing the melody. So basically like composed that piece like in one take, like the whole thing from start to finish. So
before you get there, all these songs, right?
Yeah.
They already had the lyrics written.
Ennodu, the lyrics were like being edited and written on spot. Adiye lyrics were already done.
Thalli Pogathey is what I'm most curious about, because it's so tied to the lyrics when you listen to it.
For sure.
Yeah.
So this was so what we had as a our reference and the brief was Sir singing. So when he does his like jam sessions or stream, when he's doing that, there'll be a couple lyrics here and there that he's just using as his anchor points for syllables, and so it was just that. It was one full take of just, and you know that song goes into like odd time signatures and everything. It's just really him just doing his thing, and so the lyrics were not set when I first went, and this was right after the floods that same year, so 2015. So it was like December, I think. I got called into studios at night, and they played me the brief, and Thalli Pogathey was also there. She had spent basically the whole time with the floods with like no power working on this song, and she kept saying this was so challenging, you know, it's not like anything I've ever had to write before. So she'd spent a lot of time on it, but Sir had just gone upstairs once I got to the studio. He wasn't there. So Thalli Pogathey kind of like tried to show me how the lyric and the melody tie together, and I wasn't really getting it. But they told me again, his brief to me was internalize the melody. So I did that the best I could and just kind of like understood the movement of it, but it's so progressive, you know, like it doesn't fall on a hook until like 3 minutes, 30 seconds into the song when finally you get Thalli Pogathey. But until then, it's just literally a piece that's constantly moving. It doesn't stop. But then you have these little, so Ennodu Nee Irundhal, Marbin Vegam Kudde, Manamoyedo Solle Vart Tedde. There's like little hooks, like Kasayadi Pole Mudugin, which is like very hooky kind of stuff, but they're like fleeting hooks. They're there and then you keep going.
And there's not much repetition either, so
almost none. And so I again, this was a session I was really scared for because I hadn't, at the time, I had sung Adiye Nee Irundhal, and I think Kadal had come out 4 or 5 months before. But I hadn't really made my mark in the industry. I think I wasn't honestly getting calls from a whole bunch of people because what I offered was something that was a little bit outside of what was happening, you know, the sound of that time. So I really wanted this to work. And I was just like in a point in my career where I needed something to lock in. So I had that brief playing just in my headphones, like on repeat. And then I went to the studio. Then they said I could go home. I went into the studio the next morning. And we started that recording around 10, with Sir coming in and out. So he'd just listen, give me briefs, go out, come back. And that's one where we had to do line by line. We really had to just take the line, see how the lyric tied with what he had put down, and sing exactly what he sang with the same exact inflections, no change. There's times where I'd want to do little riffs here and there. I was like, no, just keep it to the melody.
So that song is exactly how Rahman envisioned it and sang it.
So the first version of it, which he was pretty happy with actually. So we spent the whole day recording it, with him coming in and out, and then by about like midway through, I was exhausted and we took a break, drank some tea, came back to it, and then Thalli Pogathey was also there, and she's a stickler. Like if you don't get the pronunciation right, and again, I was still at a point at that I'd sung like 3 songs, so sometimes my American accent would come out or the enunciation wouldn't be proper, and she'd get really upset at me. So it was a long day, and this was also right in the middle of the December season, the Carnatic music season. So I think I had like a concert like 2 days after that, so my mind was all over the place. But there was one point where everything finally locked in, where we had done we'd done line by line, then we'd also just repeated it a whole bunch of times. Then Thalli Pogathey had me sing it back to her like 15 times just to get like the lyrics right. Finally, like maybe after like that, like all those processes, I internalized the melody like they'd initially told me to, like Sir had wanted me to do. So then we recorded it like 2 more times after that, and by the end of it, Sir, you know, normally he'll have his comments or saying this works, that doesn't work. So for the hook, Thalli Pogathey hook, I did the octave Thalli Pogathey, and then also one octave up, which was really high, but I kind of managed to get those notes out. So he was kind of like putting everything together. He just brought the high octaves down so that they became textural pieces instead of like the main thing. He brought the lower octave up, which was new for me because I was used to singing everything really high all the time. Right. And that's all. He kind of looked back at me, just smiled, and I was like, oh, whoa, this is crazy, you know? Because, again, and none of us really understood that piece at first. We were, including myself, just trying to make sense of what this was, you know? Because it is a pop song, for sure. It has, like, the production of it is, like, hip-hop trap kind of vibe. The melody, the way they process my vocal is pop, but it is like abstract pop almost. Where
why do you say it's pop? Because typically one of the big characteristics of pop is the repetition.
Sure.
You know, like a chorus kind of thing that keeps coming, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that people can sing easily.
Yeah.
This is anything but.
Yeah, I think the reason I say it's pop is because one, that chorus, the hook, right, is like one of the catchiest pieces of music that's come out in the last decade, you know, or maybe more. The sonic texture of it, right, okay. that felt like it was very much, it was of the times while also pushing the boundaries. But it's super abstract and very, very progressive, you know, right. And I think the trailer version had come out. So in the trailer version, I sing Kasayari Pule Mudugin, and then it goes Thalli Pogathey, and then all that happens right after that. But and I think there was like talk of that being the version that comes out, like with the hook happening once and then again, which would have made it more of a traditional kind of piece where the verse is a little abstract and not following specific form, but you get the hook earlier on. Right. But I think Gautam and Sir also wanted the song to sound like a journey, so Sir really took that to heart, and he said, no, this hook comes at the end of the song, they don't get the payoff until the very end, you know, and it's just genius, you know. I didn't know what to make of it. We listened to it once it was done, and then I didn't hear from anyone for like 2 or 3 weeks, you know, because I figured Ennodu Nee Irundhal was recorded in 2013 and came out in 2015. Right. So I figured like this was going to be another such thing where there's going to be a while in between. But and this I've talked about, December 31st, I had a Carnatic concert, which went really well, so I was already happy. And we were about to go to like Toscana to get dinner or something for New Year's with my family, and I got the call to go back to the studio. Sir was in a super good mood. He was just, and he sat with me, and we added like a couple, like background vocal layers and stuff like that. The specific layers that we added was like, I forget what exactly it was, but some really subtle things that added a lot of depth to the song. It was like 2 lines, but it really gave it this thing. And then I think that trailer that they released that night, or Jan 1st morning, was supposed to be with dialogue and everything. But I think just as an experiment, Sir took this cut of the song and just synced it up to the trailer. They took out all the dialogue, and it was just magic. You know, it just like there's those moments when you see a piece of work and everything just locks in perfectly. And this was one of those moments where I just thought like, oh wow. You know, it's not even, it wasn't like some sensationalist stuff. There was nothing crazy going on screen, and with the music, it was just the meat of it. The very core of it just worked, you know. And then it came out and it did what it did.
I think, you know, I also get what you mean about the popness of the thing, because there's these like this 80s songs, you have these big fat synth chords going all around. You know, that's like it's you don't hear that kind of heavy synth chords very often in music. I mean, they used on the side or something like that, but throughout the song, you have that thing pounding away. Sure. Like an 80s pop song. So
It was just going. I think it's a testament also to the intelligence of the listener. I think like too often we say, oh, it has to be this way or that way, or else people aren't going to get it. But these people that are listening are, you know, they might not be singers or whatever, but they have the same aptitude. They're going through the same things that anyone
Right.
else is going through. So, and I think that's one place where I really very kind of fundamentally appreciate composers like A.R. Sir or all the greats, where they don't dumb anything down. You know, they're pushing the listener the same way they're pushing their peers, and that's very apparent.
So I'm going to ask you a question that is a very generic question, but I'm hoping you'll make it specific with your answer.
Sorry.
So what sets this man apart?
Whew. That's, I don't even know if that's a generic question. It's a big question though.
Yeah.
I think it's a few things. I think one, a very kind of almost mundane kind of thing, but it's just attention to detail. Like, you know, when I've recorded with him, he'll pick up on the smallest of things that I didn't even know happened. Or when he's, I've had the pleasure of being in the studio while he's actually like arranging and programming some stuff. Just like little parts. There's one song, I don't know if it'll ever come out, but it was something that we did like a couple years ago. And there's like a Senai part that comes out, like I sing and then it happens, and then the end of the Senai part just kind of like has this like little bend upwards. And it's like, it's like just like one tiny embellishment that leads the song into the next section. It makes a world of a difference, and I think that kind of attention to detail is one. Two, the curiosity that he still has to this day, where I think like he's never felt like he's larger than music, or but I want to give you something that's like less of a cliche, because I'm sure that you've heard all these things before. You know, there's an urgency about him. There's like this deeply seated hunger to just find more, you know, and I think that coupled with his spirit as a human being, like that urgency can a lot of times go sideways if you don't have a grounding. It's just like as a person, you know, whether that be with your spirituality or your family, whatever, that urgency can lead you down certain rabbit holes that can be very, you know, anxiety-inducing. But with him, he has that very strong foundational grounding in who he is. He's super comfortable in who he is. But that urgency is just as powerful. So he's always pushing for what's next. You even listen, like CCV, I sang the Telugu version of Praptam. You can really honestly tell that he's never satisfied, that there's always more that he can do. You know, whether that be in music or whatever realm that he's in, I think that's what it is. Urgency combined with a very strong sense of self. So like you're always moving forward, but you're moving forward and not side to side so much. You know, and I think that's what kind of really sets him apart.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question, man. I was scared for a second.
You did well, I think. So.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Da-da-da, da-da, la, 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 Film Companion South. Hey everyone, this is Sid Sriram. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to Film Companion South.
So that was episode 1 of my interaction with Sid Sriram, where we're talking about 3 generations of Tamil film music. We have 2 episodes left, one about Ilaiyaraaja and one about MSV and the older generation. Do tune in to Film Companion South.